Sally was trying to get in the mood for work, but she couldn't concentrate on writing an article about the harvesters. Romanishina looked at her with understanding that Sally, your brain does not want to wake up, and I understand you also cannot engage in the process of productive work. The participation of a colleague touched live strings in my heart. Claire, you almost hit the mark. No matter how hard I try to encourage my body, it doesn't want to wake up early in the morning. Neither exercise nor strong coffee helps. Claire rolled her eyes. Wow, I didn't know you were so serious. Exercise is like a fantasy for me. Claire lovingly stroked her rounded form and said with obvious smugness, I don't want to exercise at all, and doctors say that you should listen to your body and do only what it wants. That's why I advise you not to strain your mind in vain. A blissful smile spread across Claire's face, but it disappeared immediately. She said in an official tone, Sally, try to get your material to me early because I'm going to be really busy tomorrow. You know I've got to get it to the set in time. I'll be a real pain in the ass, Sally mumbled. All right, Claire, I'll try. I haven't even started writing the article yet. I can't get my head around it. It's too bad you haven't, Sally began to explain in an apologetic tone. The head of the department is always bugging me to go to one place or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if now he suddenly appeared on the doorstep and said. The woman's vivid monologue was interrupted by a sharp phone call. Sally picked up the receiver, and Claire asked in a whisper, Who? Sally made a grimace and answered in the same whisper, covering the receiver with her palm. He, Claire mumbled muffled. It's not for nothing that they say remember something and it will show up. Sally listened to the chief and then hung up with irritation. She took a few deep breaths. There I was, just as I felt all my plans had fallen through. I guess I'll have to write my material tonight, Claire asked with a sneer. Not as another high priority assignment. I think so. He told me to come in right away. Sally slipped out the door, and Claire reluctantly began to lay out the next issue. Claire had worked in the editorial office of the Native Land newspaper for more than 10 years, and had learned the ins and outs of the job. The only thing she couldn't understand was the relationship between the staff. Before, when the staff was headed by the old editor, everyone got along with each other, even celebrated holidays together. But 3 years ago, Dave had been honored with a well-deserved retirement, and Mike, a young executive, had taken over the reins from his older colleague. The new editor was eager to take over. At the first meeting he announced that from this day on, i.e. from the moment he took over, working conditions would change. Dear colleagues, I promise you that you will not be idle as before. Therefore, I advise you to prepare for a busy work schedule. You should also forget about weekends, because all significant events take place mostly on holidays. The young editor said a lot of things that no one believed at first when everyone left the small conference room stunned by his innovations. E-dial operator Tim said confidently, It's all just words. Our Mike doesn't have the guts to break tradition, and that's no way to talk to people. This unintentionally thrown phrase by Tim almost became fatal for him. About an hour after the meeting, Mike called him into his office and warned him that he would not tolerate such behavior in his team. He advised Tim to watch the bazaar, and if he did not like the work in the editorial office, no one keeps him. Such was the cruel beginning of the young editor's leadership. Some of the disgruntled began to think of quitting, but in such a small town, finding a job is not an easy task. While Claire was pondering this hot topic, a heated argument was going on in the editor-in-chief's office. No sooner had Sally crossed the threshold of the office than Mike said to Sally in a tone that did not tolerate any objections. It is urgent to make materials about the volunteer movement, so you will go to the gymnasium right now. They have an event at 10 o'clock, something like a meeting, so you'll make a small report. We'll put it in tomorrow's issue. Sally could feel the indignation boiling up inside her. Trying to keep her emotions in check, she asked calmly, Mike, but I haven't finished my article on the best farmers in the area. Were you planning to put it in tomorrow's issue too? Mike said, not without a sneer. We'll do both. Sally, I don't see what the problem is. The young editor's tone and his unwillingness to understand her pissed Sally off. She began to explain with an obvious sneer. The problem, Mike, is that I'm not a machine. I'm a human being. You gave me an urgent assignment yesterday too. And the day before that. I just can't physically keep up with it all. I get the impression that you're deliberately trying to push me around. I'm not the only one working in the newsroom. Couldn't you have sent someone else to the volunteer meeting? Sally took a breath and mentally marveled at her courage. Mike gave her an unkind look, then said, "Sally, when you take over as editor, you'll do as you please. Then you'll do as you see fit. As long as I'm editor-in-chief, I'll do as I see fit. You're a correspondent on the staff, and you're obliged to do everything I tell you to do. And if you are not satisfied with this algorithm of work, then you can write a statement." Sally wanted to sass Mike and even send him to a known address, but she only mumbled, "I'll think about your proposal, Mike." The man in charge shouted after her, "I want the volunteer material on my desk this afternoon." When Sally appeared in the office, Claire said, "From the look on your face, it didn't sound like a very pleasant conversation." Sally shouted at the mocker, "Claire, don't you go getting on my nerves. I don't want to cry wolf over this injustice. I'm being chased around like a schoolgirl. I don't know why everyone's on me." Claire, in the same tone of voice, explained, "Our Mike, he only likes himself on special occasions. I forgot how he put Tim in his place. He took it out on Wendy, too. Poor thing couldn't take it anymore and took a sick day." The romantic's face took on a mysterious expression as she shook the door to the next office and began to whisper, "Sally, I'll tell you in confidence that a few days ago you seemed to be on a mission." Mike scolded Lizzie in front of everyone. Sully muttered, "What a surprise. He gets on her a lot and she puts up with it," as if to summarize the conversation on this sensitive subject. "If I were Lizzie, I'd tell her husband to go to hell. He's not only abusing her morally, but he's also very active in her left." Sally didn't like gossip, so she didn't continue the conversation. She took the tape recorder and headed for the exit. "Okay, Claire, you do the work. I'm going to have to work through the night tonight. The chief said both stories will go in tomorrow's issue." Claire cursed in his heart. "This sucks. Thanks, buddy. That's really good news for me. I guess I'll have to spend the night at the newsroom tonight." Sally didn't have to listen to Claire's misery. Her conversation with the editor had shaken up her brain, and she was thinking about how to write a quick, light-hearted piece about volunteers. The woman had gotten a decent distance from the editor's office when she heard quick footsteps behind her. Sally turned around and saw Lizzie running after her. "Sally, wait for me." Sally stopped. "All right, I'll wait. Don't run like that." She took a quick step, but it didn't help her breathing. Sally thought with pity, so young, and already she had health problems. She didn't seem to be prone to such bad habits as smoking, though she and Lizzie had a considerable age difference. The girl sometimes confided her little secrets to Sally, so she was the first to know about her pregnancy and the fact that Mike did not want to commit himself to marriage. But Lizzie's parents found very convincing words, and Mike changed his decision. After the wedding, Lizzie briefly enjoyed happiness, but did not share her worries with any of her colleagues. Then she went on maternity leave and only returned to work a few months ago. Mike at work tried to ignore his wife, so his recent antics angered everyone. Sally waited patiently for Lizzie, and when she came closer, she asked, "Why didn't you call me before?" She was embarrassed. It was awkward. "I hear you're going to the gymnasium?" "Yes, the chief found a special assignment for me." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to the bank." They walked on in silence for a while. But Sally felt that Lizzie had something else to say to her. But she didn't have the courage. Sally decided to help the girl. "Lizzie, you didn't stop me for nothing. You have something to do with me. Don't be shy. Tell me." Lizzie looked at her pleadingly. "Sally, could I go to the gymnasium with you?" Sally was surprised. "But you have to go to the bank," Lizzie explained fervently. "I'll go to the bank later. That was just an excuse to get Mike to let me go. He's watching my every move. What about you?" Lizzie was silent. Sally was at a loss to guess what Lizzie was trying to tell her. "If you don't want to, don't say anything." Suddenly Lizzie burst into tears. "No, I will. I know you are a very decent man. You won't tell anyone. I have no one else to confide in. Will my parents not understand me, or will they press Mike again?" Sally asked. "And they'll do the right thing if they have to." Lizzie looked around, as if checking to see if she was being followed. Sally asked, "I have a suspicion that my Mike has another woman. He's been very different lately, coming home late. He's even stopped paying attention to his son, and just recently I found out that he's been tangling with a young teacher from the gymnasium." Sally whistled quietly. And you decided to face your rival? Yeah, something like that. Are you sure it will make you feel better? Lizzie looked away. I don't know. I don't know anything. Everything is all mixed up and I can't think of anything else. Sally lightly put her arm around the unfortunate woman's shoulders. Lizzie, you must think of your son. I don't advise you to show your face in the gymnasium. You'll only make things worse. Men don't like a woman's weaknesses. Remember that. Lizzie looked at her wide-eyed. Sally felt sorry for the girl, and she wanted very much to help her. She suggested to Lizzie, let's you and I have a quiet talk after work. Liz was happy at first, but then she turned sour. Mike won't let me stay late, and I have to pick up Max at daycare. Okay, then we'll reschedule this conversation for lunchtime. I'll try to get to the gymnasium as soon as possible and I'll call you right away. Would that be all right with you? Lizzie kissed Sally on the cheek in a flurry of emotion. It would suit me very well. Thank you. The Young Volunteers meeting was a dull affair. The speakers were using hackneyed slogans and there was nothing new in their plans. Sally recorded some of the speeches, and even before the meeting started she had time to interview one of the organizers of the movement in their neighborhood. She decided not to wait until after the event and hurried to the newsroom to work on her article after the lunch she had promised to spend with Lizzie. Unexpected purses, the cell phone chimed in. It was her high school friend Pam. Sally, I'm having a total meltdown, a fiasco of my family life. Pam was bellowing at the top of her voice, and from her empty story, Sally realized that she had caught her husband with another woman. Refusing the mercy of a close friend, Sally couldn't for many reasons. She suggested the only possible option. Pam, I sympathize with you, but I won't be free until tonight. Pam was glad, even if it was at night. You're the only one I can pour my heart out to. Come see me when you're free. Sally disconnected the phone and bitterly thought, I didn't expect that one day I'll turn into a vest, in which everyone who is not lazy will cry. Although it was a responsible mission, it wasn't very pleasant. Sally, as promised, devoted her lunch hour to Lizzie. A half hour and a comforting chat in the cafeteria helped the young woman calm down a bit. Then a cheered Lizzie went to the bank and Sally flew to the newsroom. Lizzie was willing to sit in the cafeteria some more. But Sally couldn't afford that luxury. I'm sorry, Lizzie. I'd love to talk to you some more, but I've got 2 more articles to write before tonight. The important thing is to keep your head up and never humiliate yourself in front of your man. Better yet, change your hairstyle or color your hair. It's the most effective way to influence men. And Lizzie, Sally said admiringly. How clever are you? She corrected Lizzie. I'm not clever. I'm experienced. The second half of the working day flew by. Sally was working with redoubled zeal on urgent articles about Claire. I can't wait to get home. You've all run away and I have to stay here until the landscaping is done. Sally answered Claire without taking her eyes off the monitor. Just hang in there a little longer. Just a couple more paragraphs and then it's ready to go to the editor. I'll check it myself. Finally, both articles were ready, and Sally could breathe easy. Claire, don't be bored here by yourself. I'd love to see you. But I have to feed my men at home and then drop in on a school friend. Claire's eyes sparkled. Family problems, too. Like her husband getting caught in the act. Claire mumbled directly. There's an epidemic of infidelity among men. I guess I should check mine out, too. Sally didn't elaborate on this exciting topic, because her mind had already switched to the domestic wave. She thought I'd make a quickie and run to Pam's. The something category included noodles, dumplings, and other convenience store meals. Since the refrigerator was always strategically stocked, there was no need to go to the store. The culinary process was nearing completion when John appeared. From the doorstep, the son announced, Mom, I'm going to get a quick snack, and I'll run. Sally asked her 15-year-old son, Where are you going to run to? John dashed into the kitchen, to the school stadium. We're going to play soccer. Tonight is the match of the century. We're going to beat the other class because they're so tough. Sally's wrinkling her nose. Son, I don't get it. Last time we gave them a head start, and they were so proud that they were invincible, so we had to surprise them. Sally was struck to the core by her son's statement. Trying not to offend him, she cautiously remarked to John, My mind refuses to accept your street lingo. Can you at least talk to me in normal Russian? The teenager grinned. I can, Mom. Give me something to chew on, because my stomach is already rumbling, woman. looked affectionately at her son. "Oh, you can do it. And it's nice to hear human speech. Now I'll feed you, my dear child." Sally put a plate of pasta in front of her son. "Come on, I'll pour you some compote." It took John no more than 5 minutes to eat. Sally had been trying for years to instill good eating habits in her men, and for some time she'd had obvious success. But now, watching her son, she realized that all previous accomplishments had gone to waste. To emphasize her displeasure, she said, "John, you swallow like a duck, and poorly digested food contributes to gastritis and other stomach disorders." The teenager looked at his mother again with a chuckle. "Mom, for some reason you make such remarks only to me. Dad also eats at a cosmic speed, and I take an example from him. After all, in decent families it is customary for the younger to take an example from the older." The woman replied with annoyance, "You have to follow good examples." Her gaze slid over her son's head and fixed on the clock that ticked merrily on the wall. "Wow, it's 8:30 and our daddy's not here. I wonder where he's been." John gave his mother a condescending look. "Mom, Dad, yesterday I told you he'd be late today. Don't I recall him saying something like that?" "Mom, you talk about everyone, you make comments, and you ignore important information. And in general, I do not like that you and your father lately, often disconnecting from reality, he, like you, is also sometimes hovering in the clouds." A calling cry came from the street, and John threw on a run. "Okay, Mom, I'm off. The boys are calling." Sally hurried into the hallway where her son was pulling off his sneakers. "John, don't stay out too late. You've got homework to do. That's a warning." The teenager only grinned crookedly. "Mom, what homework? Summer vacation is in 2 weeks." The door slammed loudly and the sound made Sally wince. "Yes," he mumbled in confusion. "Indeed, it is already the second half of May, and the schools would soon be out of session. How quickly time flies." The woman cleared the table and began to get ready to visit her friend. She was already in the hallway when Pam impatiently reminded herself with a call. "Svet, where are you? I'm waiting for you." "I'm waiting. Alyonka, I'm running home. Things got a little crazy at home. I'll be at your place in 5 minutes." Pam lived a stone's throw from their house. Sally expected to see her friend with a face swollen with tears, but she was in full dress and smelled of expensive perfume. Sally was confused. "Pam, I shouldn't have come. Where are you going?" Pam pulled her into the apartment. "You came just in time. Come on in. I'll come with you. I'll tell you what I'm doing." "I'm sorry. I'm not propositioning you." Sally hastily interrupted her friend. "You don't have to. I've already had dinner. Can you explain to me what your outfit means? I thought you were suffering." Pam exclaimed. I'm not a snot-nosed person." Pam sat down gingerly on the edge of the couch. "Sally, I've decided to take my revenge, and my revenge is going to be brutal." Sally got worried. "What are you up to?" Her friend's face took on a mysterious expression, on the assumption that a wedge is driven out by a similar object. "And I've decided to return the favor. I'm going to go to some hot spot and pick up a date, and I'm going to make sure my hubby sees me with another man. I can see how he'd be furious." Sally was speechless for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Pam, you're insane. Why do you have to be like your unfaithful husband? Think of the children. You'll never forgive yourself for taking such a step." For several minutes, Sally reprimanded her friend. At first, she dismissed her arguments, and then she burst into tears. "Sally, it's not me, but you're crazy. I thought you were holding me back by approving my decision. And you've said so many things to me that I feel like the most outgoing woman in the world. How am I supposed to react to him cheating on me? I mean, he brought that girl into the house, and I'm sure he's been practicing this kind of behavior for a long time." Pam was crying, smearing makeup all over her face. "You have no idea how hard this is for me right now." Sally stroked her friend's shoulder. "You won't believe this is the second story about a man cheating on her today. We have a girl working in our editorial office, and her husband, by all accounts, also goes to the left. So, Alyona, I can well imagine what you're going through." Suddenly Pam screamed, "No, you can't imagine the shame and humiliation I feel. I mean, you have the perfect husband. He comes home from work on time and doesn't look at other women." Sally was angry. "Pam, I don't understand why you're bringing my husband into this. I mean, I've never noticed anything about him. But it's not my fault I got such a decent husband instead of you, Pam said with annoyance. That's what you call a conversation. Sveta, I just wanted you to understand, and you're attacking me. I thought I was the happiest person in the world until yesterday. And today. Pam burst into tears again, and Sally began to comfort her friend. It wasn't until close to midnight that Sally was in a hurry to get home. Pam, I'm gonna go. My men must have lost me. Pam apologized for a long time. Sally, I'm sorry if I did anything to offend you, but you know how I am after this. My nerves are shot. Sally smiled forcefully. I understand, Pam, and I don't resent you. I don't know how I'd feel if I were in your shoes. Pam grinned wryly. Try it, you fool. Unintentionally thrown words and even thoughts can materialize. Sally waved it away. I'm not superstitious, but if you insist, I'll perform the ritual. Ugh. Pam's apartment door closed, and Sally wandered home. She felt truly sorry for her friend, and thought with a shudder, God forbid I should have to face such a problem. She didn't want to think about Jack's possible infidelity, and Sally began to mentally convince herself, no, my Jack is a family man to the core. I can't even imagine that he would do that to me. She opened the door of her apartment cautiously and kicked off her shoes without turning on the hall light. Fatigue weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the woman whispered, My legs are aching. I wish I could get to bed. Trying not to wake her husband, Sally climbed under the covers. Jack muttered grudgingly to Sally, Where the hell have you been? She whispered. You, Pam. And she had some family drama. Her husband sighed. Aren't you tired of playing Mother Teresa? I couldn't say no to my best friend. The man rolled over onto his other side. Let's go to sleep. I'm so exhausted from today. Sally closed her eyes and fell into a pleasant sleep. When she woke up in the morning, her husband was gone. The woman was surprised at his early disappearance. He came late and left at dawn. What's so strange? And his things scattered all over the room. Jack's jacket was left on the chair and his shirt on the back of the chair. Chastised for her carelessness, Sally picked up the jacket and walked over to the closet. Jack had quite a rich closet, so the woman with difficulty squeezed in the ill-fated jacket. This element of his own clothes did not fit very well into the slender row, and she began to hastily correct what was in the neighborhood. Suddenly, Sally's hand came across a dense bundle in the pocket of a man's jacket. She had never checked her husband's pockets, but this time she couldn't resist. The envelope turned out to be an incomplete bundle and bills of 1,000 denomination. The woman looked at the money with surprise, not wanting to believe her eyes. He had never made a stash. For what purpose had he hidden this money? She was brought out of her daze by her son's shout. Mommy, aren't you afraid of being late for work? It's almost 8 o'clock. Thanks, son, for reminding me. Sally put the money back in its place and started hurriedly getting ready for work. After the daily meeting, the editor-in-chief gave her a special assignment again. Sally, scolding the chief, went to fulfill his assignments. The day flashed by in the usual hustle and bustle of work, so she had no time to think about yesterday's meetings with her friend or the morning opening. After work, Sally could hardly move her legs. She was greeted in the hallway by her smiling husband, the mother of the family. What took you so long? She mumbled something unintelligible in reply. She thought her husband's smile was fake. She wanted to ask him about the money hidden in his pocket, but an inner voice told her that the time had not yet come for such details. As the days passed, Sally became more and more suspicious. If before she had not paid much attention to her husband's tardiness, now she was closely watching his behavior. Not only did the woman begin to catch a special meaning in what he said, but the facial expressions on her husband's face did not escape her attention. One day after dinner, Jack asked his wife, Sally, can you please explain what's going on? The woman was washing the dishes and, without distracting herself from her work, asked a counter-question. Jack, what are you talking about? The head of the family, with obvious irritation, said Sally, Do not pretend that you do not understand what I'm asking you. You've changed a lot lately, and I've noticed that you look at me like I've done something wrong. It wasn't the right time for a confrontation, so her answer was succinct. That's just your speculation. Jack didn't want to waste time on a night of arguing either, so he said tiredly, Let's keep it that way for the future. I want to ask you, if you don't like something, let's talk at once. Remember, we agreed with you before the wedding that there should be no secrets between us." The woman grinned and thought to herself, "No secrets. And yourself? Hiding money. And the amount of money in that coffer is not small, 80,000. But she said out loud, "Jack, I remember everything, and I don't have any secrets from you." She emphasized the phrase "I have," but the man didn't catch the implication in her words. He immediately switched to another topic and began to talk passionately about the struggle for a vacant position at his job. "Sally, let's save our secrets for later. There's a lot going on at work. You have no idea how low people can get when they're obsessed with getting a job," she asked without interest. "I hope you are not involved in this struggle?" The man folded his arms across his chest. "God forbid. And why do I need the chair of the head of the department? I never wanted to climb to the top. I'm quite happy with the deputy position. More discretion and less headaches." To keep the conversation going, Sally asked another question. "What about your boss? Is he going to be promoted?" Jack said bitterly. "No. The top management has decided to send our Sam to a well-deserved retirement. He's 65 years old now, and frankly, he's having a hard time managing." Sally sighed expressively. "It's a familiar situation because our old editor was also politely asked to step down. After he left, there was a lot of infighting in the newsroom. And Mike, the young editor, had divided the staff into two castes, the favorites and the untouchables." Jack stared fixedly at his wife. "Sally, which group did Mike put you in?" The woman grinned bitterly. "Jack, why do you ask stupid questions? You know I'm not in the habit of groveling. Mike's taking it out on me. He's pissing everybody off, even his own wife. Not only does he abuse her in public, but he's practically openly walking out on her." Jack grimaced. "Sally, I realize that your editorial board is the most informed organization in our little town. But you know better than I do that any unsubstantiated information is considered gossip. And I don't want my beloved wife spreading such rumors." The woman did not expect to hear words of condemnation from her husband. She confusedly twirled her plate in her hands, and her husband watched her with a smile. After a long pause, he said, "Sally, have you heard the expression, 'don't believe your eyes'? I have." So we often jump to conclusions when we see something unusual. Maybe your Mike's wife just thought he was cheating on her, or maybe people just talked down to the guy. Sally remembered how Pam had whined when she saw another woman in her husband's arms. She'd been so angry that she'd interrupted her husband with indignation. "Jack, there's no smoke without fire. People don't just say things like that, although I agree with you on some of that. But how can you not believe your own eyes if the unfaithful husband is having fun with his mistress in the marital bed? Or in such a case we should comfort ourselves with the fact that he is just giving a woman familiar to a health massage?" Jack was astonished. He blinked his eyes confusedly, then began rubbing the back of his head vigorously. "Sally, you knock me dead. I can't argue with that. And who is this unfortunate traitor?" After a brief pause, the woman reluctantly answered, "You were just saying 5 minutes ago that spreading rumors is a despicable thing to do." Jack's curiosity was clearly piqued. "I'm not encouraging you to do anything despicable, but you're my wife. There should be no secrets between us." Sally sank tiredly into a chair. "Jack, it's not my secret. It's Pam's. Though she's probably already called everyone she knows to tell them she caught her husband." The man even whistled in surprise. "So it's Alex who's the bully." The woman looked disapprovingly at her husband. "Jack, it seems like you're thrilled. Maybe you'd like to follow Alex's example." Jack coughed, then said dryly, "Sally, stop picking at my words. You're filling your head with bad thoughts and trying to attribute to me things that didn't and can't happen. I'm going to go watch TV. John's laughing his ass off. I think they're showing something funny." The head of the household left the kitchen, and Sally was left alone with her unhappy thoughts. She quickly cleaned up the kitchen and headed for the bedroom. John excitedly announced, "Mom, come join us. It's such a funny movie I could tear up my stomach laughing." She waved her hand tiredly. "Son, I'm very tired. I want to go to bed early. I have a lot of work tomorrow." John asked with interest, "Are you going to run around the fields and farms again?" Sally grinned wryly. "Yes, the editor-in-chief has me plugging all the holes, but I have to obey," the teenager said firmly. I'll be my own boss. I don't want to be bossed around by any assholes." The woman was surprised. "What makes you think that my boss is an asshole?" John laughed. "Mom, you told Dad and your girlfriends that many times when you talked to them on the phone, but I didn't overhear it. It's just that you have a habit of talking in high-pitched tones. I think the neighbors know about your editorial squabbles too." Seeking support, Sally looked at her husband, but Jack pretended to be watching a movie comedy. Only the satisfied smile on his face showed that he was in complete agreement with his son. Sally thought angrily, "Okay, Jack, and I'll remember this later." The woman headed for the bedroom, but as soon as she crossed the threshold of the room, the shirt he had left on the bed caught her eye. The woman cursed in frustration. "He's completely stupid. Is it really that hard to hang a shirt on the shoulders?" Her irritation overwhelmed her and was ready to burst out. But by an effort of will, the woman restrained herself. "Sally, take it easy. Don't be nervous. You can't fix your husband, so you'll have to smooth over his mistakes for the rest of your life. And now you're going to get that poor shirt out of the wrong place." Sally took the piece of men's clothing and examined it closely. For a moment she thought she smelled perfume on her husband's shirt. She brought it up to her face and began to grasp it. "I think I'm slowly going crazy on the grounds of suspicion." The woman set the unfortunate shirt on her shoulders, then slipped it into the closet and lay down on the bed. She fell asleep quickly, but in the middle of the night she was awakened by the ringing of her cell phone. Her husband whispered quietly, "It's my cell phone. You sleep. I'll go out into the hallway so as not to disturb you." Jack was gone for quite a while. When he returned, Sally asked him, "I wonder who calls you at night?" The man replied evasively, "It was business. I have to go out for a little while tomorrow, or today, after work. So don't expect me for dinner." Sally couldn't stand it. "Jack, don't you think you've been away too much lately? Isn't it time you told me about your secret affairs? My husband is angry. Please don't talk to me like that. I'm sick of your suspicion." The man defiantly turned his back to the wall, showing his resentment towards his wife. Soon he was snoring, and Sally never slept a wink. Just before dawn, she fell into a restless sleep, which in the morning left an unpleasant residue on her soul and a wild headache. All day long she remained in a state of prostration. Claire asked Sally with a sneer, "Where are you today?" Sally replied languidly, "Claire, let's not get cute. I hardly slept at all last night, so I'm not in a working condition at all today. But if you're worried about the readiness of the materials, I can assure you that I'll have everything written by Wednesday." Claire, with a cheerful wink, "And I'm sure you will. And I want to make you happy. Louisa's coming off sick on Monday, so you could use a bit of a bum's rush." Sally got a little bit of a kick out of it. "Claire, I'd love to relax, but I've got a lot on my plate." The familiar spark of curiosity flickered in the executive secretary's eyes. She moved closer to Sally and asked in a mysterious whisper, "Sally, maybe I can help you with your problems." Thoughts rushed through Sally's mind. She was used to being cautious when talking to fellow writers, but the desire to bring her spouse out into the open moved her. In a whisper, Sally said, "You'd be a great help if you could tell me how to follow my husband without him noticing." Claire darted her eyes. She could hardly contain the suddenly rapid breathing that gave away her excitement. "Sally, and you too. Has there really been an epidemic in our God-forsaken town?" Sally nudged her in the side. "Claire, you can be quieter in expressing your feelings." Claire looked at Tim, who was sitting next to them. Suddenly, a happy smile lit up her face. "Oh, that's just what we need. Sally, our Tim is good at this sort of thing. He even worked for a private detective agency at one time, and I think he knows how to organize a discreet surveillance." Claire was silent for a few seconds, and then looked at Sally pityingly. "Sally, you don't know how much I sympathize with you. To be with your husband for so many years and then one day find out he's cheating on you. You wouldn't wish that on your worst enemy." Her friend's sincere participation touched her heart, and she decided to tell Claire some details of her family history. "Claire, I have a slightly different situation. I'm not sure my husband has another woman. I just don't like his systematic tardiness and absences because he doesn't tell me anything. I want to find out for myself where he is constantly disappearing to for hours at a time, Of course, I wouldn't want to tell Tim about my problem. Claire interrupted her. You don't have to spill everything. Tim doesn't like to get into other people's business. You tell him you need to watch someone and he'll give you a bug or some other thing that records phone conversations. Sally decided not to put an important matter on hold. Before lunch, she asked Tim for a few minutes. Tim said cheerfully to Sally, I'm ready to listen to you until tonight. Without going into details, Sally said what was important. Tim, I need to observe someone, but I need to make sure he doesn't suspect anything. Tim winked at her. Sally, you've come to the right place and I'm going to help you. Tim rummaged through the drawers of his desk for quite a while before he pulled out a tiny object that looked like a pin. This is a device that will allow you to actively track your target. It can be connected to a laptop or smartphone, and you will hear everything that the person you are interested in is talking about. The only downside is that this thing works at a short distance. But if you don't have the ability to follow the subject, you can set the bug to record. Tim demonstrated several times how to get the devices in working condition and what to consider when using it. If there are any difficulties, feel free to call me. Sally wanted to give money for the service, but Tim took offense. Sally, that's not necessary. You've helped me out many times since I got my job at the paper. Now it's my turn to help you as much as I can. The woman was very excited when the listening devices were in her hands. At home, she began to consider her next course of action. John and his peers were frolicking on the playground, and her husband was late as usual. She tried to solve a problem of increasing complexity. Where do I put this bug so my husband won't find it? She went through a dozen options, but only one had the least number of risks. The woman decided to attach the device to her husband's purse. Jack practically never parted with this accessory. And there were many compartments, so it was not difficult to hide the bug. Sally wasn't a fan of detectives, but after receiving the listening devices from Tim, she felt like a heroine of one of the works. Now she had to install the miniature device, but she couldn't find the right moment to do it. Every evening after dinner, Jack sat on the couch with the remote control and often fell asleep in front of the television. At the same time, her husband kept his purse, and Sally desperately wondered where else she could put the bug. Luck suddenly smiled on her Friday night. After dinner, Jack had dressed in a tracksuit. Sally wondered if Jack had somehow decided to take up sports. The man replied cheerfully, I'm Sally. I'd like to reminisce about my youth. When I was a student, I was seriously involved in sports, and I even had achievements in this field. I think a good warm-up would be nice, a woman remarked. Jack, normal people warm up in the morning. Sally, why do you always criticize me? Instead of approving of my actions, you make unfair remarks that make me feel like a complete idiot. I'm well aware that the best time to exercise is in the morning, but as of tomorrow morning, I have important things to do. This vivid monologue the man uttered in one breath. His words hit the mark, and Sally felt embarrassed at her nagging. Even so, she sarcastically remarked, So you're going to disappear all day tomorrow? Jack impatiently corrected his wife, Not for the whole day. I'll be back for lunch. She looked into his eyes and asked him with a pleading tone in her voice, Jack, isn't it time you told me everything? He hastily kissed the woman on the cheek. Sally, the time will come and I'll tell you everything. I'll go. John's waiting for me. The woman exclaimed in surprise. Really? Our son has decided to take up sports. The head of the family smiled contentedly. It's to my credit. I talked to my son in a manly way and he understood me. Our son plans to take up wrestling seriously. When her husband left, Sally decided not to waste any time. Following Tim's instructions, she installed the bug and then went about her household chores. The most contradictory feelings were struggling in her soul. On the one hand, she felt like a criminal for daring to spy on her husband, but on the other hand, she felt something akin to jubilation. At last, I'll know everything about my husband's adventures. In the meantime, the woman decided to check if her husband's coffers were still in place, but there was no money in his jacket pocket. She thought bitterly that he had already spent it all. Sally hoped that her husband was saving the money for a present. After all, it was Sally's birthday in June. But now she realized that the funds she had discovered were, by pure coincidence, earmarked for something else entirely. And she wanted to know what her husband had spent it on. The thought had been on her mind all evening. And at night she had nightmares about Jack. Evil old women trying to drag him away, and Sally trying to stop them. She must have been screaming in her sleep, because in the morning Jack asked Sally with a chuckle, "I wonder what you dreamed about last night." She admitted it was nothing. "I dreamt you were attacked by 3 old ladies and I fought them off." "Why do you ask? Did I behave violently?" The man rubbed his left cheek. "That's the word. You punched me so hard in the ear that even the stars in front of my eyes glowed." Sally felt embarrassed. "You should have woken me up. What's the use?" She gently stroked his cheek where the blow had been unintentional. "I'm sorry, darling, I didn't do it on purpose." The man touched her hand with his lips. Who wouldn't? A man in a dream has no control over himself. Sometimes I have dreams that I can't get out of for half a day. Sally jumped out of bed and quickly pulled on a robe. "I'll try to make it up to you. I'll go make you some breakfast." Jack was touched by his wife's concern. "Sally, it's been a long time since you've been so kind. I'm willing to take another blow on the ear for that." The woman laughed out loud. "No, I'd rather kiss you." The man put his cheek and dreamily said, "How I wish this morning would never end." He tried to hug her, but Sally dodged her. "Jack, I'm going to make breakfast. You've got some business to run." He nodded his head. "Yes, I do. But I won't be long. Hey, maybe we could catch a movie tonight." She was breathless with excitement, very quietly. Sully said, "I don't mind. You and I haven't been out in ages." Sally. She was so emotional that she almost cried so her husband wouldn't notice what was happening to her. She hurried into the kitchen. She wished her husband wouldn't go away and spend Saturday afternoon with her and her son, but she didn't dare tell him. The events of that morning had thrown the woman a little out of her usual rut, and she had forgotten her plans for a while. It was only after her husband had gone to the bathroom that Sally remembered the bug. She was burned by the unpleasant thought, "How I hate to go to all the trouble. But I'll have to." The woman spent the rest of the day in anxious anticipation. Jack came home for dinner. There was no trace of his morning cheerfulness, so Sally did not remind her husband that they were going to go to the movies. He spent the evening with his son in front of the television. This time he had left his briefcase in the hallway, and Sally carefully removed the bug. Now all that was left was to listen to the tape. The woman was getting impatient. She couldn't do this important business in front of her husband. Suddenly she remembered a school friend. Pam wasn't surprised by her late call. "Sally, where have you been? Aren't you wondering if you're alive? Or have you given up already?" Sally began to make excuses. "Pam, I'm sorry, but I'm totally swamped at work. And at home, too." Pam grinned that she was also swamped. Sally replied evasively, "Look, can I come over for 5 minutes? 10 minutes. Sally warned her household, "I'm going to Pam's for a while. I need to talk to her." Jack didn't even turn around. "Just don't disappear into the night like last time." Sally lingered briefly in the doorway. Her husband's indifference hurt her heart. She remembered the wonderful morning again, and tears came to her eyes. Pam was frozen in one pose, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Sally waited patiently for her friend to be able to speak her mind. But time passed, and Pam could not get out of her trance. The guest had to have an effect on her. In a sly voice, Sally asked, "Pam, stop trying my patience. What do you think?" A convulsive shiver ran through Pam's body. She broke away from contemplating the lingering ceiling and grudgingly mumbled, "You want my opinion? All right, have at it. I think you raised a false alarm. From the timbre of your voice, your husband was talking to a very old woman." Sally interrupted her friend impatiently. But there was another voice. "You heard it, didn't you?" Pam confirmed it. "I did. But it's not hard to guess that she was thanking your husband. The girl's just a baby." Sally jumped out of her chair. "Pam, I'm amazed at your stupid indifference. What if that girl is his daughter?" Sally was amazed at her own sudden discovery. "That's right. How did I not realize that my husband might have a child out of wedlock with another woman? So he hides it from me. No matter how many times I ask, he won't tell me where he's going." Pam looked pityingly at her friend, and when she had run out of arguments, she said, "You've said it all." Sally nodded her head affirmatively. "That's it." Pam continued the flight debriefing. "Sally, I had a better opinion of your mental faculties. I think you've been watching soap operas and now you're fantasizing. Didn't you notice they both call your husband by his first and middle names? If the girl were his daughter, would she address him differently? Sally remarked resentfully. Pam, you don't have to talk to me like that. I may have gotten some nonsense into my head, but you have to admit I have my reasons. I wonder what you'd do if you were me. Pam sighed. I have my own place. I don't know what to do with mine. He goes begging for my forgiveness every day. Sally quickly moved on to another topic. What about you? Pam bitterly replied, I can't forgive him. Nothing. I can't imagine that picture. Maybe I'll forgive him later, but not now. I feel sorry for the children. They're worried. They ask me, where's Daddy? And I don't know what to tell them. Pam filled the kettle and put it on the stove. You know, Sally, I'm so stressed out I can't even eat. Do you think I should see a doctor? Sally shrugged her shoulders. I don't know if the medical profession can help you in a situation like this. Pam lowered her head. You're right. They won't. You have to get yourself out of it. What I can advise you to do is to push the boundaries of your investigation. Expand how? Very simple. You find an address where your hubby visits, and then you just drop in unexpectedly. Pam's eyes sparkle. Hey, I just had a brilliant idea. You're a reporter. You could interview anyone in the neighborhood, Sally confirmed. In principle, I could. But we usually do things according to plan. The editor doesn't like it when things are done against the wind. Pam sighed again. You don't have to report to him. The important thing is to convince that grandma that you're there in good faith. Talk to her and you'll find out. After a short thought, Sally agreed with her friend Pam. Okay, I like your plan. The only thing I don't know is how to get the address, Pam said irritably. We'll have to tail him when he comes back for his next visit, and I'd be willing to be your personal driver for a while. You don't have a car yet. Sally threw her arms around her friend. Pam, you're a genius. I've been racking my brain, but I've never had a simple thought like that before. I don't know what I'd do without you, Pam said with a satisfied smile on her face. Sally, now is not the time to marvel. When we have brought this to its logical conclusion, then we can celebrate our mutual success. Sally spent the next few days in anxious anticipation. She was sure that her husband would go to his acquaintances again at the end of the week, but he called her unexpectedly at work on Thursday and told Sally in an excited voice, I'll be back a little later today. She replied irritably, You could have given me no warning. I'm used to your constant absences. One thing surprises me. How long is this going to go on? Jack was silent for a few seconds, and then he said calmly, Sally, please don't get worked up. I'm going to tell you everything very soon. She threw her cell phone down angrily. Claire, you're distracted. Sally, keep your emotions down. You break an expensive toy, you'll have to buy a new cell phone. Sally apologized to her colleague and wanted to leave the room, but she stopped her. Wait, I wanted to ask you, how is your investigation going? The conversation with her husband had thrown her off balance, and she answered irritably, Nothing. Claire, don't ask me that again. Sally headed for the exit. If the editor asks where I am, tell him I went to interview a labor veteran. Claire, snapped back, you report it, and I'm not going to cover for you. Sally realized that Claire had taken offense at her. She had neither the time nor the inclination to explain herself to her. To relieve some of the tension, she went into the cafeteria. A cup of strong coffee cleared her mind a little, and the woman remembered her conversation with her husband again. The thought flashed through her mind that she should call Pam right away. In a nutshell, she described the situation to her friend and firmly declared, Sally, I'm going to your husband's office right now, and you should try to get off work too. Pam, I'm free until tonight. I'll be right there. The next events unfolded rapidly. After lunch, Jack came out of the office. The man was clearly in a hurry. He got in his car and drove onto the main street of the town. Pam said excitedly, Well, Sally, I think we're in for a real treat. Pam was an experienced driver, so she managed to keep a safe distance while keeping up with Jack's car. As Jack's car pulled out of town, You make sure he doesn't see us. She grinned. I don't think your Jack would be suspicious. I just don't understand why he's brought things to this point when he's got no record of any wrongdoing. Why the secret trips? Sally's back. I can't find answers to these questions either. You wouldn't believe how much I've changed my mind this month. I've been acting up and I can't get my thoughts together at work. I can't stop thinking about those damn trips and what he spent the money on. Pam wondered, What money? Sally had to tell her friend about her husband's accidental stash. Pam whistled. I didn't realize it was so messed up. It's really a lot of money. And it's wrong for your husband to take money out of the family budget. Sally, that's probably why he's afraid to tell you the truth. But that's okay. You and I will find out the truth. Jack pulled up in front of an old 2-story house. Pam parked her car in the neighboring yard. The women saw the object of surveillance enter the entrance and prepared for a long wait. But after about 20 minutes, the man came out and got into his car. Pam said thoughtfully, "That was fast." When the man's car was out of sight, Sally said decisively, "Well, Pam, now I'm going to go scouting." Pam said grudgingly, "Don't get your horses in a rut, friend. We have to wait a little longer." Sally grumbled, "What's there to wait for? They don't know me anyway." Pam said nothing, and Sully had to wait for her friend to give her a command. The time dragged unbearably slowly, and the nerves were frayed from the long wait. Finally, Pam said, "You can go now, but try to find out what's going on as soon as you can." Sally jumped out of the car and ran to the driveway. She and Pam figured out that the apartment they wanted was on the 2nd floor. Relying on her intuition, Sally headed for the boarded-up door and pressed the bell button. Footsteps were heard, and then a familiar voice asked, "Wait a minute, I'll get it." The door opened and Sally saw a pleasant old lady looking at her warily. "Oh, I thought Jack was back. Who are you?" Sally smiled. "I'm a reporter for our local paper and I'm looking for Mary." The old woman was still looking at her suspiciously through her cheek. "Let me see some ID. There's all sorts of people walking around selling crap." Sally took out her ID. The old woman took a long look at it but was satisfied. She took off the chain and opened the door. "And what's the reason for your interest in me?" Sally had a prepared answer. "There are many people in our neighborhood who have made invaluable contributions to the prosperity of our area. And you, Mary, are one of them." The old woman wrinkled her nose in displeasure. "I have done nothing to write about me. And the newspapermen came to me last year." Suddenly a teenage girl came out of the room. Sally was amazed that she was using crutches. But this fact did not seem to bother her at all. She said hello to Sally and told the landlady in an admonishing tone, "Grandma, if a person came, it means that it is necessary." After that, the girl turned to Sally. "Don't take offense at my grandmother. She's very shy. She doesn't like to talk about herself. And she has so many awards." "Come on, I'll show you," Mary, yelling at the girl. "Lara, how many times have I told you that it is not good to interfere in the conversation of adults?" The girl smiled at her grandmother. "I'm big enough to have my say." The landlady gave up. "Okay, all ready." She turned to Sally. "Come on in. Don't you mind my nagging? Old age is a time when you're always dissatisfied with something. So I do it, even though I don't want to. Now I'll show you my diplomas and awards from the government. I've got pictures too." Sally prepared for a long story, but Mary stopped only at the main events of her life. "I was 15 when I learned the tractor. In those days it was considered a feat. That's why I was always nominated as a delegate to all kinds of conventions, symposiums, then sent to an exhibition in Moscow. There I was awarded the Order of the Red Banner of Labor. Later I received the Order of the Badge of Honor. Then I joined the party and moved from the tractor to the chair of the collective farm." Over the years of working in the editorial office, Sally often met people with rich biographies. But the life stories of this pretty old lady shocked her so much that she even forgot about the real purpose of her visit. But it so happened that Mary herself turned the conversation in the direction Sally wanted. Suddenly she said, "What's the use of writing about me? All my good things are in the past. You could say that I already have one foot in the grave only for the sake of my granddaughter I live, because without me my Lara will be lost." Lara looked at the old woman unhappily. "Grandma, you again." Mary sighed. She doesn't like it when I talk about death. It's understandable. She's still got a long way to go. Sally decided to ask the question she was most concerned about. What about the girl's parents? The old woman cast a quick glance in the direction of her granddaughter. "Lara, you should go to your room, even if you think you're an adult. Not everything is for your ears." The girl got up from the chair and went to the far room. Mary looked at her sadly. Then she said, "Lara is my granddaughter. She was born that way. She has a defect in her legs. When Kate was alive, she went to different doctors with the girl. And when she was gone, everything slowed down. I can barely get things done at home. Sally cautiously asked what had happened to Laura's mother and where her father was. Tears welled up in the old lady's eyes. That's a separate story. Kate and Henry were married almost immediately after high school. Their love was such, as they write in books, without each other could not live a day without each other. But it's not easy to provide for a family, especially in these troubled times. So Henry decided to join the contractors to make more money. That's what he told Kate. A year in the service, I could pay for my daughter's surgery. Kate resisted, but then she agreed. Where he was sent is still unknown. First he called his granddaughter, and then he stopped hearing from her. Kate knew right away that something was wrong with Henry, but she held on, hoping that everything would be all right. But then the uniformed men came and told us Henry was dead. Mary was silent for a moment, then continued her sad story. We hadn't even buried him. Kate, they handed over that forget-me-not vase of ashes. Sally, said the urn. The old lady looked at her gratefully. I don't have a very good memory. Yes, the urn was brought in. I told Kate we should take it to the cemetery. She wouldn't take it. She kept that vase at home. Probably made her sick too. Soon she was diagnosed with cancer. We buried her and Laura 3 years ago. And now they're the only ones we've got to worry about. If it wasn't for Jack, I don't know what would have happened to us. My pension is decent, but it's still not enough for the two of us. Sally was surprised at Mary, but Laura is entitled to a disability group. The old woman waved her hand. No way. I asked her about it and they just dismissed me, saying that my granddaughter is not entitled to it, and they didn't tell me where I could get so much money. Jack said he'd help, but he's not all-powerful either. It's people like him you should be writing articles about, not me. Sally left Mary's apartment with a vague feeling of shame and despair. She did not hurry to the car, where her friend was waiting impatiently, leaning on the railing. Sally tried to regain her composure. To that end, she even took a few deep breaths and slow exhalations, and it helped to calm her inner trembling. The woman walked down to the first floor and pulled the front door open. She was stunned to see her husband on the porch. Jack, too, was shocked by the unexpected encounter. Sally, what are you doing here? She had already regained her senses and threw it in her husband's face. I should be the one to ask you what you're doing here. I guess you've forgotten that all secrets come out one day. Without waiting for an answer, the woman turned and ran to Pam's car. Her husband didn't try to stop her. He stood at the entrance of the old house and looked at her with surprise. For several days, the couple did not speak. Jack tried to mend relations, but Sally ignored even his presence. When she returned from work, she cooked dinner, then closed herself in the bedroom. John realized that his intervention could only complicate the situation in the house, so all day long disappeared with friends. Apparently, amidst the shock of meeting Mary and her granddaughter, Sally wrote an article that struck a nerve even with Mike. The young editor did not call her to his office this time, but came to the room where the work was in full swing. He looked at everyone with a peaceful gaze. Guys, do you mind if I sit here for a while? Claire responded immediately. Mike, you can sit here until you burn. Don't worry, no one will bite you because we're decent people, even though we're not vegetarians. There were scattered chuckles. Mike raised his eyebrows in surprise. Claire, you have a sharp tongue. Claire smiled wryly. I'm very soft, though. It was a hint of her rounded shape. Claire looked directly into the editor's eyes and he looked away in embarrassment. Mike quickly got over his momentary confusion and turned to Sally. Sally, as a matter of fact, I'm here for you. I was pleasantly surprised. Honestly, I didn't expect such material from you. It's very well written. I hope you will keep this high standard in the future. We will put your article in the next issue. Mike looked expressively at his wife. Claire, in her usual manner, replied, Mike, you didn't have to say anything. I knew right away. When the editor-in-chief left, Claire winked cheerfully at Sally. You need a little shaking up, and you'll be on your way to becoming a man. The only thing that surprises me, Sally, is that normal people are inspired by the beauty of nature. But you're stressed out. Sally didn't want to speculate. She was pleased that Claire had forgotten her recent spat. The only unresolved issues were family matters, so she spent the rest of the working day thinking about whether she should forgive her husband at once or keep up a deafening defense for a few more days. But she had no time to decide this seemingly simple question, because Jack came to the editorial office at the end of the working day. He went straight to the chief's office. He talked to Mike for about 10 minutes. Claire was burning with curiosity. Sally, do you know why yours showed up? I have no idea. My husband must have some business of his own. Maybe his organization wants to advertise in our paper, Claire said disappointedly. We have more advertisements than useful information, and everyone needs it now, and I'm left wondering where to squeeze the next one in. Sally did not listen to Claire's complaints. She wanted to get home quickly and preferably without her husband, but he caught up with her. Sally, will you stop sulking? I'm here to pick you up from work. Thanks for your concern, she said, but it wasn't worth the hassle. I'm used to driving miles on my feet while you drive around town. They had already traveled a decent distance from the newsroom, and it was only a short drive home. But after his wife's rebuke, Jack slowed down abruptly. Sally, let's talk. We need to set the record straight. Otherwise, this could end badly, she asked with a sneer. Bad for whom? He barked. For both of us. Yes, I realize I was wrong. Of course, I should have told you right away. But I was afraid of your reaction. I thought you wouldn't understand and you'd get angry. And you'd blame me. Tears of resentment came unbidden to her eyes, and Sally couldn't hold them back any longer. Jack, what are you talking about? What kind of reaction are you thinking of? By hiding your secret affairs from me, you've done a better job. You have no idea what I've been through this month. First, I thought you were seeing another woman, and then I started to think you had a daughter out of wedlock. But that's not the worst part. Jack was amazed by his wife's fiery speech. He quietly asked Sally, What's the worst part? Jack, that I humiliated you to the point of spying on you. I even put a bug in your purse to find out. He exhaled in horror. You followed me? Yes, Jack, I was. But you're the only one to blame for how I got to this point. I never thought we'd get to this critical point. The other day you brought up our pact not to hide things from each other. I've always shared with you. She opened the car door. I'm sorry. I need to be alone for a while. Jack sat in the car for a long time, trying to get his thoughts in order. Only now did he realize how much he'd hurt the woman he'd lived with for almost 2 decades. He whispered, She's right. I'm a complete idiot. Really? Why would I hide the fact that I was helping Kate's family? I was going to go and fall at her feet. Sally was cooking in the kitchen when the apartment door opened cautiously. She thought her son had returned from a walk and called out loudly, John, at least show your mom your eyes, or I've already started to forget what you look like. But instead of her son, Jack showed up. He had a huge bouquet of flowers in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. He smiled guiltily and pleadingly asked Sally, Let's forget all offenses and let's have peace. For some reason, at that moment, the woman remembered again that wonderful morning that had brought back her and her husband's happy post-wedding period for a few minutes. She smiled too. I don't mind. Let's give it a try. But you're going to tell me first why you decided to help this old lady and her granddaughter? Jack exhaled with relief. Okay, Sally, I'll tell you everything. Although there's not much to tell. I used to live in that neighborhood with my parents. They got an apartment in the city during my happy childhood. Life in the village was boiling, and we had interesting events every day. My best friends were Kate and Henry. They called us the tolerable trio at school. Sally put in. Unexpected nicknames. Jack said with satisfaction, unexpected but understandable. The thing is, we were on the list of top students, and our pictures were on the honor board. That's why in high school we were trusted to carry the school banner at the ceremonies. You can't imagine how proud we were of that. I can imagine what happened after that. That and your friend must have been in love with Kate, Jack replied, embarrassed. You couldn't call it a crush. I tried to court Kate in 7th grade, but she approved of me right away. She liked Henry. A year after graduation, they were married, and Henry went into the army, and I went to college. For a long time, our paths diverged. We called each other occasionally, though, and I learned of Henry's death. And then she got sick. If she'd told me earlier, she could have been saved. But after Henry died, she was a little out of it. One day she sent me away and told me never to come back, so I disappeared for a while. About 6 months ago, I ran into Mary by chance. That's pretty much the whole story. Sally, after a long silence, took it right out. Yes, it's a very sad story, and it's a shame about the girl. She's very pretty, and so defective. It must be hard for her at school. Jack was touched by his wife's concern for other people's grief. Lara is a very resilient person. Despite her handicap, she's able to defend herself. When the girl lost her parents, they wanted to put her in an orphanage. But brave Mary defended her right. She used her old connections to make a very scandalous case. But the court left the child with an elderly relative. But as time went on, the old lady began to give up. That's why you decided to help them. That's one of the reasons. You know, when we were kids, we swore we wouldn't leave a comrade behind if he got into trouble. It may sound ridiculous, but we tried to honor that vow. It was only Kate who later, after Henry's death, refused my help. But she wasn't exactly mentally sound. Sally put the flowers in a vase of water. Jack, of course I admire what you did, but it's impossible to tackle a complex problem alone. I mean Lara. My husband got up from the table. I'm well aware of that. I even tried to track down some of our former classmates to raise some money for the girl's surgery. But there weren't many people willing to donate. But there are charitable foundations. We should ask them for help. The man waved his hand. That's not going to work. Lara doesn't have a disability, so she's medically healthy. Paradoxically, if you initiate fundraising yourself, you might be seen as a fraud, Sally said thoughtfully. In other words, it's a vicious circle. The man spread his hands. That's how it works. But the most unpleasant thing is that such operations are done only until the age of 14. So Lara doesn't have much time. Sally had caught the idea of helping the sick girl from her husband. All evening she thought about Lara, and in the morning she was suddenly struck by a simple idea, which she shared with her husband Jack at breakfast. We should write an article about Lara. There are a lot of kind people in the world, and I'm sure there will be many who would be willing to help the poor child. Jack was at first distrustful of her idea, but after thinking about it, he agreed. It's worth a try. What if one of the wealthy people will decide to donate to good deeds? After all, in fact, the amount is not so large. When Sally shared her idea with the editor-in-chief, he didn't immediately warm to it either. On the contrary, Mike asked with an obvious sneer, Sally, are you going to throw your endeavors at me? Have you thought about how the local authorities would take such an article? Sally replied with a smile. I have thought about it. There will be no hint of a fundraising appeal in the article. I will simply tell about a girl who is living an active life in spite of her physical handicap. The editor gave up. Okay, you've convinced me. The day after the Lara story was published, the editorial office was flooded with calls. Claire didn't have time to answer those who wanted to help the poor orphan. She rebuked her friend. Sally, you're the one who made this mess, and I'm the one who has to deal with it. But Claire's remarks were unkind, so Sally was not offended. After the article was published, the social workers were suddenly in a frenzy. They suddenly remembered about the labor veteran, and almost every day began to visit the old lady. Mary was touched by such attention. But now it's not a sin to die. But I'd like to wait until Lara's operation. For almost a year, Lara was in one of the best clinics in the country. After the operation, the girl needed a long period of recovery. Her spouse visited her several times. Only the grandmother never came. The girl was very worried about her elderly relative. Jack, how's my grandmother? I can't wait to see her. Mary didn't wait for her great-granddaughter to return. She died a few weeks before she was discharged from the clinic. The Sallys didn't know how to tell the girl of her grief, but Lara figured it out when they came to pick her up. I know my grandmother's dead. I dreamt about her and she told me everything. There were no tears, no complaints, only sadness-filled ones. The girl's gaze spoke of being frightened of the future. That look penetrated into Sally's very heart. She pulled the girl close to her. Lara, don't be afraid of anything. We won't leave you alone. After these words, the girl cried quietly. Thank you. You are so kind. I will never forget what you did for me. John was not surprised when the parents brought a complete stranger into the house. He extended his hand to the guest. I'm John, and you're Lara. The girl agreed, nodding. I guess you and I are kind of brother and sister now. What's up? Is it fun? At least we won't get bored. I'm even willing to give you my room. The couple looked at each other. Jack said to his wife, Our son is smarter than you and me. He knew what was going on right away.